Salutations! We're continuing our Halo weapon tier list series, this time jumping into Halo 3. I'll be splitting Halo 3 into two videos, one for campaign and one for multiplayer, as both modes are entirely different realms from each other. Halo 3's weapons will be judged based off a solo, legendary run with no skulls enabled, to show the true mettle of the weapon sandbox. I prefer to rank them for legendary play compared to heroic because I feel if a weapon is truly good, it can adequately aid the player on the hardest difficulty in the game. I look for overall consistency, how common a weapon and their ammo is, its matchup against the game's roster of enemies, and whether or not it's outclassed in its role compared to the others. Halo 3's roster of enemies are mostly the same as Halo 2's, but this time, the Brutes have taken charge of the Covenant forces. The Flood have gained the new pure forms as well. The Sentinels only appear as enemies for 2 on-foot encounters, so they won't be as considered. Many of Halo 2's vehicles return in Halo 3, including new ones in the Brute Chopper, the Anti-Air Wraith, and the Prowler. While there aren't as many vehicle encounters as infantry, some weapons have excellent anti-vehicle capabilities, and will receive bonus points for them. Players can also trade their weapons with allies, who never run out of ammo when using them. The order that we tier these weapons will correlate to when they appear in the campaign, hence why the assault rifle is first. One last thing before we start tiering, big shout out to Scruffy the Sasquatch for providing an Excel spreadsheet showing the global damage table in a more cohesive manner. Damage effects use a calculation to quantify damage. Their base damage value multiplied by the material-based modifiers their damage type uses. I'll be referencing this chart heavily for the tier list, and I'll leave a link in the description to help you follow along. With all that said, let's begin tiering Halo 3's weapons. The Assault Rifle. After leaving Halo to get milk in Newports, it's back in Halo 3, and significantly reinvented. While Halo CE's was a close quarters brawler with high fire rate and spread values, Halo 3's is more versatile. It's significantly more accurate with sustained fire, and while the fire rate is slower, it's still fast enough to get the job done. The Assault Rifle also received a damage nerf after CE, dealing 7.5 damage of bullets slow per round. The other noticeable nerf is for ammo capacity, for both the magazine size and spare ammo count. That being said, while both are lower than CE's by a great deal, it's still a lot of ammo compared to other weapons on this list. The Assault Rifle is a generalist. It doesn't excel at any one thing, but is adequate enough at quite a few. It can decently take on unshielded enemies, but more importantly, it's a good brute shield stripper. Halo 3's brutes have lower shield values than elites, allowing the Assault Rifle to neutralize their shields quite efficiently. For instance, Brute Chieftains have 89 shield points, requiring only 12 rounds to break them. A precision weapon can then follow up by shooting their helmets off for the headshot kill. That being said, while the Assault Rifle is good against their shields, it's not as good against their flesh. Unshielded Brutes have a 50% resistance to bullet slow, which turns the AR's damage to 3.75 per shot. Players will need to combo their shots with melee attacks and grenades to kill Brutes with just the Assault Rifle. This weapon is surprisingly good against Flood combat forms. Their infection form region is a weak spot, and the AR's good accuracy lets it land shots there pretty easily. However, it struggles against pure forms, which are all way too bulky to dispatch efficiently. One trait that is a sizable weakness is the projectile velocity. It has the slowest bullets out of any human weapon in the series, at 80 world units per second. It's still good enough for targets at close to mid-range, but players will struggle to hit targets from long distances, especially if they're moving around. I'm going to give the Assault Rifle a solid B tier ranking. As I said earlier, It's a generalist that doesn't shine in any one aspect, but it's a good starting weapon that'll help you in many areas. It's one of the most underrated weapons in the series, and I hope more people see how good it truly is. You're just standing there. Like, are you okay? You alright? Where are you going? Don't do that! Why'd you do that? You had so much to live for like 5 more seconds before I killed you with my assault rifle. The Magnum is next. It underwent a massive transformation after Halo 2. Its fire rate is much slower, and the magazine size was lowered, but the damage was increased to compensate. This weapon is our first example of a precision weapon, one that can insta-kill unshielded enemies with a headshot. It's also our first example of a dual-wield weapon, enabling players to hold it in one hand and another weapon in the other. Sadly, while Halo 3's Magnum is an improvement over Halo 2's, it's still unremarkable. The only reason players use this is because it's a starting weapon on both Sierra 117 and the Storm. Once you find the battle rifle or carbine, you're swapping the Magnum out for either of those. This pistol lacks a scope, unlike its competition, and its spread is 0.5 degrees, which is wide for a precision weapon. And it only gets worse when dual wielding, with a max spread of 1 degree. These traits pigeonholed it to close to mid-range combat. Really, the only trait the Magnum has over its contemporaries is dual wielding, but it's only average in this mode. The aforementioned wider dual wield spread makes precision shooting difficult. Moving on to the damage output, while 15 damage per shot is high, its slow fire rate makes it not the best at dealing with brutes. It's best used for quickly killing the grunts and jackals that surround the brutes, while the assault rifle and other weapons strip the brute's shields. This particular point matters because pistol ammo is quite rare in the campaign, another damning downside for this weapon. The pistol is our first C tier. It's severely outclassed by other precision weapons, but it's not lower than C because of its nature as a starting precision weapon on 2 missions. We surprisingly have an explosive weapon as our third entry, the Brute Shot. It has 2 noticeable differences from the Halo 2 version. Its magazine size was increased to 6, and the grenades no longer bounce, exploding on direct impact. The grenades are also slightly stronger in Halo 3, at the cost of a slightly shorter radius. The Brute Shot's melee attacks deal more damage than most weapons. It uses the Slice melee damage effect, dealing 90 points of cutting damage with a bonus anti-flood effect. Cutting does double damage to most enemy materials in the game except for brutes and tank pure forms, which take neutral damage. Anti-flood, on the other hand, does double damage to all flood materials, resulting in double damage to tank forms and quadruple damage to every other flood form. I'm serious when I say this. The Brute Shot is one of the best weapons in the game. The great damage output from its grenades and especially its melee attacks are one thing, but what really makes this weapon great is how common it is. Nearly every brute encounter in Halo 3 has a Brute Shot user, meaning despite the low ammo capacity, you'll have a consistent amount of Brute Shot grenades at your disposal. The combination of its grenades and melee make it excellent for dealing with brutes, with 2 or 3 grenades being enough for a melee attack to finish the job. The grenades are great against shielded jackal squads, breaking up phalanxes and 2-shotting majors with direct impacts. I'd say the biggest weakness for the Brute Shot is its matchup against faraway enemies. Since the projectiles travel slowly in the air, it's best used for close range. Ammo can also be an issue if you don't tactfully use it, but they're still common enough to where it won't be a problem for long. My favorite aspect is the fact you have a melee beat stick that's nearly as strong as the energy sword, but doesn't cost anything to use. This means that even if you're out of Brute Shot ammo, just holding onto it as a melee weapon is a viable strategy. Easy A tier placement. The Brute Shot is excellent in this game. It's very common for its power level, its grenades are great against most targets, and it has one of the best melee attacks in the game that costs nothing to use. The Plasma Pistol is up next. It's fundamentally the same weapon it's been before, a plasma weapon with 2 firing modes, a primary plasma fire, and a charged projectile that tracks enemies and completely eliminates shields. What has changed for Halo 3's will stick with this weapon for the rest of the franchise. The battery drains while charging, and the overcharge shot EMPs vehicles, but at the cost of a significantly weaker tracking ability compared to Halo 2's. Halo 3's plasma pistol is much more balanced compared to its predecessors from Halos 1 and 2. It requires the user to properly position themselves near the enemy to land that overcharge shot. Since the battery drains while charging, the player has to be mindful on when to start charging as well. Sadly, the primary fire is still useless, just like Halo 2's, so the overcharge is its only viable feature, and this leads to my biggest issue with Halo 3's plasma pistol. While Halo 1's was a destroyer of worlds, and Halo 2's was the most brainless shield stripper of all time, and a necessity in elite fights, Halo 3's plasma pistol is not really an auto-include anymore. Brute shields are nowhere close to the level of Halo 2's elites. Shield stripping is way easier now than it was before, so much so that even the assault rifle is decent at it now. All that being said, the plasma pistol is still great, and is a solid B tier. One-shotting a brute shield, especially chieftains and the upper captains, will always be a good trait. It's just more difficult to land those shots now that the tracking was nerfed. EMPing vehicles is also a unique trait. It's just a shame that the primary fire tickles unshielded enemies. If you can stick the plasma grenade on the first Phantom, you'll get access to our next weapon, the plasma turret. This is our first example of a brand new class of weapon, the support. These don't take a weapon slot, instead being a third weapon the player can carry. However, it's discarded upon switching weapons or entering vehicles. The camera is switched to third person, and movement speed is nerfed by 20%. The plasma turret has a build-up fire rate, going from 6 rounds per second to 10 rounds per second. While integrated, the spread ranges from 0.3 degrees to 0.7, and when torn off, it increases from 1 degree to 2 degrees. Projectiles travel at 50 world units per second, and deal 11.5 points of plasma vehicle damage. Unlike standard plasma damage, which has debuffs versus brute flesh and heavy armor, plasma vehicle is neutral versus both of those, letting it deal more damage to them. The plasma turret's biggest strength is that it's everywhere. Aside from the various stationary turrets at some encounters, as well as some chieftains that use them, as long as there's a Phantom around, you'll have 2 potential plasma turrets to use. Damage is high, ripping through brutes, jackal shields, and many others. Having the third-person camera to look around corners is also really good. The major issue though is that 20% movement penalty. In a game where Legendary improves enemy targeting accuracy, being slow can be a death sentence against certain opponents, like brute shots, jackal snipers, and plasma grenades. It doesn't help that the projectiles need time to reach their target, which can make dealing with faraway enemies more challenging. With all this in mind, I'm giving the plasma turret C tier. It's a common high damage dealer with the OP third person camera, but forcing you to move slower is a big issue that will be the end of you at times. With the brutes at the forefront, they needed a new standard weapon, the Spiker. It's a fully automatic weapon that fires at 7.5 rounds per second. Its spread ranges from 0.5 degrees to 1.25 degrees, and while dual wielding, it's 0.75 degrees to 1.5 degrees. It carries 40 rounds per magazine with 120 in reserve. Projectiles travel at 25 world units per second, and after 6 world units, it slows down to 17.5. They also have bullet drop, with an air gravity scale of 0.2. Each round deals 9 bullet slow damage. The Spiker's melee attack uses the cut melee damage effect, which deals a whopping 2 more points of damage than standard melee attacks. The Spiker is mediocre. Its DPS is lower than the assault rifles, while also using slower projectiles that have bullet drop. It sees more success when dual wielding 2 of them, thanks to only losing 20% of its damage while firing both. However, you're forced into the issues dual wielding provides, including slower reloads and the lack of grenades. Its boosted melee damage is also a joke. 2 points? Really? At least the brute shot has 90 points of melee damage, along with double damage to most targets. You're better off using something else. The Spiker is a D tier. The only reason it's not lower is thanks to it being a very common weapon. It can kill things okay, but it's sorely outclassed in every aspect. We go from a mediocre gun to a contender for best weapon in the game, the Carbine. It did receive a few nerfs going into Halo 3. The fire recovery time is slightly slower, it deals 1 less point of damage, and the projectile velocity is less than half of Halo 2's. These nerfs aren't enough to slow the Carbine down though. The Carbine is amazing. It's the most common precision weapon in the game, being used by Jackal snipers in various brute ranks, as well as appearing in Covenant ammo caches. It has 6 more trigger pulls per magazine than the battle rifle, with the latter having 12, and can hold 1 more spare mag worth of ammo than the BR as well. The Carbine can also kill a brute slightly faster than the BR can. The biggest issue is its firing spread, which ranges from 0.3 degrees to 0.6 degrees. It can make precision shooting quite difficult against long-distance enemies, especially Jackal snipers. The battle rifle's burst fire allows for 3 headshot chances to compensate for its spread, while the Carbine doesn't have that luxury. Regardless, I still say the Carbine is an S-tier weapon. Its drawbacks aren't too damning at all, and it being so common throughout the game makes it one of the most reliable choices in Halo 3. Next is my favorite Halo weapon in the series, the Needler. Halo 3 was the start of what I call the Needler Renaissance, where the developers made an effort to make it much more viable. It lost the ability to dual wield, but the projectile velocity is faster and has better tracking. The magazine size took a hit, now holding 19 needles with 76 spare. The way individual needles deal damage changed in Halo 3. When Halo 2's hit a target, it dealt 1 point of damage on impact, then exploded to deal 2 more. Halo 3's no longer have detonation damage and deal 4 points on impact. Halo 3's Needler is incredible. Super Combines one-shot nearly every enemy in the game, outside a few exceptions. The Needler's ability to one-shot almost every brute rank is a powerful niche. Killing a brute this fast will cause grunts to scatter sooner, giving the player more combat flexibility. It has the fastest reload in the game, and for a weapon of this power level, that's amazing. The Needler is also quite common on levels it appears in, being used by many species and available in supply crates. Super Combines not only one-shot the target, but its area of effect also damages anyone caught in it, and can even make grunts feel disoriented. The Covenant respect it by attempting to dodge the needles. This can make landing shots difficult, but with patience, the Needler prevails. Having enemies dodge can be a good thing though, since it disrupts their firing patterns, leaving you room to push up or find cover. Enemies caught in certain animations, such as pointing or grenade throwing, are easy prey for the Needler. Meanwhile, the Flood mostly refuse to avoid needles, with the Stalker Pure form being the most difficult target. Like in Halo 2, Super Combines detonate the bodies of combat forms, preventing infection forms from reviving them. Against carriers, Super Combines kill the infection forms before they disperse, making the Needler one of, if not the best choices versus them. It's great versus ranged forms too, thanks to being stationary targets. While I hate to admit it, the Needler has drawbacks though. There are a few enemies the Needler can't kill with one Super Combine. First is the tank form. While it needs 2 Super Combines for a kill, it's not a difficult task and is still a good option. Next is the Hunter. You need 3 Super Combines along with a few stray needles for a kill, and with the Hunter's back armor and its partner harassing you, it's not worth the effort. The most damning matchup is the Brute Chieftain. Its armor prevents needles from sticking, making it immune to Super Combines. That being said, due to some past trauma or something, they still dodge needles anyway, so you can use the Needler as a scare tactic to give you a better position. Outside of matchups, the Needler can quickly chew through ammo, and while it's not an uncommon weapon, it's nowhere near as prevalent as the Plasma Pistol. It's A tier. The Needler is ferocious in Halo 3's campaign, destroying nearly everything in its path. It's sad that it can't Super Combine Chieftains, and it burning through ammo so fast holds it back in my opinion. The Battle Rifle needs no introduction. You know it's good, I know it's good, so I won't spend too much time here. It's mostly unchanged from Halo 2. The damage and ammo capacity are the same, but the fire recovery time is slightly slower in Halo 3. The firing spread is slightly tighter than Halo 2's campaign BR, but it's still pretty wide. The projectile velocity is less than half of Halo 2's BR, requiring shot leading at greater distances. The battle rifle is the easiest weapon to use in the game. It's a headshot machine, effortlessly slaughtering whole groups of grunts, jackals, and other unshielded enemies. While not as common as the Carbine, it's still prevalent, appearing in the hands of Marines, and it's at most human ammo caches. While the spread is nearly as wide as the Carbines, you have triple the chances for a headshot to land. This makes the BR the superior option against Jackal snipers. The BR does struggle against the game's sturdier enemies though. Brutes are not a huge issue in a vacuum, but they sponge quite a few bursts depending on the rank, and with the BR only having 4 magazines to work with, it's better to save ammo and chip their shields with other options. I say the Carbine is better versus Brutes overall. The Carbine kills them quicker, and there's more Carbine ammo to go around compared to the BR. Hunters and both the Stalker and Tank pure forms don't care about the BR as well, although the ranged pure form can be suppressed after a few bursts. The battle rifle is our second S tier. It sweeps through most of the game's enemies with ease, only struggling against a handful of tanky units. The battle rifle and the Carbine face a similar dilemma from the Halo 2 tier lists regarding their placement. It's really down to personal preference, but I'd say the battle rifle has the edge. The ease in which it deals with larger grunt squads can't be overlooked, and it's better versus jackals with its higher accuracy. In my eyes, the BR is number 1, but I wouldn't disagree if you think the Carbine is. I'll do the sniper rifles at the same time, starting with the beam rifle. It's fundamentally unchanged from Halo 2. Its recovery time is slightly slower now, but is still really quick all things considered. On the flip side, it costs less battery per shot, providing 20 shots total at 100%. Its damage output is nearly doubled from Halo 2, now dealing 80 points of plasma fast and sniper damage. The sniper modifier changed from Halo 2, no longer dealing double damage to energy shields. That being said, since brute shields are not that strong in Halo 3, it's not an issue. The larger damage value matters a great deal, as body shots are much more effective now. Meanwhile, the sniper rifle took a big nerf. Its recovery time is now 0.75 seconds, and will be this way for the rest of the series. Other than that, it received the same damage buff the beam rifle did, with the one difference being bullet fast instead of plasma fast. The snipers are always good in Halo campaigns, and Halo 3 is no exception. They deal considerable damage to nearly every enemy in the game, especially high-ranking brutes. They can also pierce through multiple enemies in one shot. Of the two, I'd say the beam rifle has the edge over the sniper rifle. It's more common, used by jackal snipers and occasionally brutes, and its plasma fast modifier allows it to damage jackal shields, while the sniper rifle can't do this. Despite the beam rifle being more common in Halo 3, it's not as available compared to Halo 2. Every jackal sniper in Halo 2 used a beam rifle, which was what made that version of the weapon S tier. In Halo 3, jackals mostly use carbines now, making beam rifle jackals a much less common sight. Both of these will be A tier, right next to each other. As I said, sniper rifles will never be bad in a Halo campaign, being great options versus high value targets like brutes. They take skill to use though, and the beam rifle in particular is rare in Halo 3 compared to Halo 2's. We move on to our next support weapon, the machine gun turret. When integrated, its build-up fire rate goes from 3.75 rounds per second to 10, and its spread ranges from 0.3 degrees to 0.7. When torn off, the fire rate actually increases by a small amount, with the minimum now at 5 rounds per second. The spread also ranges from 1 degree to 2 degrees, and there's recoil to compensate for. Projectiles travel at 100 wold units per second and deal 16 points of bullet fast damage. In terms of function, the machine gun turret is nearly everything the plasma turret is but better, double the projectile velocity, and deals more damage. This makes the turret ferocious against nearly every infantry unit in the game. However, it still has the movement speed penalty that plagues the plasma turret, and it's much less common. The plasma turret is damn near everywhere, while the machine gun turret is only at a select few locations. Something that interested me is the damage modifier the machine gun turret uses, bullet fast. Its counterpart uses plasma vehicle, and the machine gun turret in Halo 2 used bullet vehicle. Halo 3's is the anomaly here. Most of the time this doesn't matter too much, only doing less vehicle damage than the plasma turret. Where it does matter is the hunter matchup. Bullet Fast deals double damage to Hunter Flesh, but no damage to their armor. Meanwhile, Plasma Vehicle does neutral damage to Hunter Flesh while damaging them through their armor, with a 50% debuff. The machine gun requires precision against their backsides, but rewards with heavy damage, while the Plasma offers consistent damage at all times. I think the Plasma turret is better in this matchup. You don't have to worry about getting behind the Hunters, which is a difficult task when you move slower with turrets. I'll put the machine gun right next to the Plasma turret in C tier. It's very strong, but it's hampered by the limitations the support class brings, mainly movement speed. We're now at the 2 melee weapons in the game. Starting with the Gravity Hammer, its primary attack unleashes an AoE blast that hurts multiple enemies at once, and has a lunge to help close the distance. It uses 5% of its battery per swing, giving it 20 total. Each attack deals 50 to 160 points of explosion damage, depending on whether the target is hit directly or in the blast radius. The lunge attack also deals 150 points of damage on top of the 160, totaling to 310 against the target. Its secondary melee attack uses the Smash Melee damage effect, which deals 10 more damage than standard melees. The hammer is disgusting. Its high damage output makes it great for killing large targets such as high-ranking brutes, hunters, and tank pureforms. Its ability to clear out a small squad in a single hit is scary, especially versus grunts, jackals, and flood combat forms. The hammer's AoE can also cause disorientation for grunts. As is the case with CQB weapons, it can be difficult to approach faraway enemies while using the hammer. However, since hammers are used by chieftains, if you kill them before they use invincibility, you can use the equipment for yourself and become unstoppable for a few seconds. Using the primary swing can be a waste on smaller individual enemies, so the secondary melee is preferred, but is nowhere near as powerful. The Gravity Hammer is also tied with the Energy Sword for having the highest scariness value in the game. For those unaware, scariness causes enemies to react in various ways. Brutes act more defensively, activating equipment or taking cover, and if the scariness is high enough, grunts flee at the sight of you. The hammer is pretty damn scary. Easy A tier. The hammer is devastatingly powerful, and is great for crowd control, but it's pretty rare in the campaign, only used by chieftains, and a single flood combat form on the last level in the game. The Energy Sword is our second melee weapon. Its attack speed is nerfed from Halo 2. On the flip side, the sword got buffed as well. In Halo 2, the sword deals different amounts of damage depending on the attack animation, 90 for standard melees and 150 for lunges. In Halo 3, all of the sword's attacks deal 150 points of damage, and on top of that, it gained the anti-flood damage modifier for extra overkill versus the flood. This is the best anti-flood weapon in the game, hands down. Every flood form dies in one hit, even the tank forms, and battery expenditure is decreased, using 2 to 3% against flood. You can get swords on non-flood missions if the Arbiter dies, but most of the time, it'll only have one swing worth of battery. You can still make use of it though. Most brutes won't die to a single sword strike, so you can swing once, which will break their armor, and then it'll die to a headshot. That being said, you're better off using a plasma weapon or the brute shot's bayonet if you're going to do this. You can get a full battery sword from Arby though, but the setup is a bit complicated. Wait for the Arbiter to berserk and create a sword out of thin air, then wait for him to put his new sword away. Kill him with the headshot weapon, then take the sword. It'll have full battery. This will only work if the Arbiter has no backpack weapons in his loadout, unlike at the start of CR117. Targets that aren't flood forms drain 10% of the sword's battery with each kill. Like the hammer, the sword terrifies grunts. In fact, Halo 3's sword got a buff here. Even an empty sword puts the fear of God in grunts, which the Halo 2 version can't do when it's empty. The sword is also A tier, right besides the hammer. It's the greatest flood killer, which is especially important on Cortana, the hardest level in the game. It's great versus everything else too, but acquiring a sword on non-flood missions requires jank with the Arbiter. Next up is the SMG. It got some buffs in Halo 3. It deals more damage and it's more accurate. In practice, the SMG is a better assault rifle. While individual bullets are weaker than the assault rifles, the fast fire rate more than makes up for it. The SMG's projectiles are also more than 4 times faster than the assault rifles, making it easier to strip brute shields from far away. It has some glaring issues though. The SMG is quite rare compared to the assault rifle, and it chews through ammo very quickly. Its spare ammo capacity is much lower than the assault rifles too, providing only 3 extra magazines compared to the assault rifle's 10. The SMG got arguably worse as a dual-wield weapon. Its rate of fire slows down when both weapons fire. Combined with slow reloads and lack of grenades, dual SMGs are not worth it, which is really sad. Despite this, I think the SMG is pretty good, and is a B tier option. Reliable versus brutes and a decent unshielded enemy killer, but there are quite a few better options than it. Moving on, we have the plasma rifle. Statistically, it's not too different from its Halo 2 counterpart. It's slightly less accurate when single-wielded, but the dual-wield accuracy got a significant buff, almost like the spread didn't change at all. The dual-wield damage penalty is slightly less than Halo 3's plasma rifle, dealing a bit more damage now. The plasma rifle is excellent in this game. It's the textbook definition of a shield stripper, but unlike the plasma pistol, the plasma rifle is good against unshielded enemies too. It only takes a handful of shots for a brute's shield to break, while grunts, jackals, drones, and the Flood all die to this thing very easily. While the SMG is terrible at dual wielding, the plasma rifle excels at it, being the best dual wield weapon in the game. Its high accuracy while dual wielding makes it a great anti-Flood option, enabling it to hit the weak spot with precision. It's more than competent single-wielded as well. You can pulse the trigger to fire faster, and as a shield stripper, it combos well with melee and grenades. It can be a rare sight at times, but that doesn't really matter since the battery is very efficient, with 400 shots being available at full. One matchup I haven't brought up yet is the Sentinels. In the last mission, after Johnson dies, you're left with just an assault rifle until you run into combat forms wielding the plasma rifle. Grabbing those give you a great option to deal with the now enemy Sentinels. Ally plasma rifle users, especially the Arbiter, make great partners for your headshot weapons. I'd say the biggest weakness of the plasma rifle is its nature as a close to mid-range weapon. It struggles to deal with enemies from far away, especially Carbine and beam rifle users. I'm giving the plasma rifle A tier. It's an excellent weapon that deserves respect, and is one of your best friends on Flood levels. It's only being held back by range issues and a bit of scarcity. We now have the shotgun. Like the sniper rifle, it received a fundamental nerf that will remain with the shotgun for the rest of the series. It can only load 6 shells instead of 12. Other than that, the shotgun received buffs and nerfs in certain areas. It shoots 5 more projectiles per shot and has a tighter spread, but the range is slightly lower, and individual pellets deal less damage, resulting in a slightly weaker shotgun. Halo 3's shotgun is weird. It sounds like a terrible weapon, but funnily enough, the shotgun feels better in Halo 3 than in Halo 2. Legendary elites in Halo 2 are more resistant to that game's shotgun than Halo 3's brutes are to this one. The shoot and melee combo is ferocious against brutes. It's still strong enough to one-shot most of the lesser enemies, and is a great option versus hunters. Bungie did an oopsie with its damage effect though. The shotgun uses 2 damage modifiers, Bullet Slow and Kill Flood, just like in Halo 2. However, Kill Flood doesn't exist in Halo 3 anymore, and when there's a modifier that doesn't exist, the game reverts to 1x effectiveness for all materials. Before you get too excited, the shotgun is not neutral versus everything, because its primary modifier is Bullet Slow. The shotgun should have anti-Flood instead, which would give it double effectiveness versus the Flood, but it doesn't. It's not too necessary for combat forms, but it would be nice for pure forms, especially the tanks, which take multiple shots to kill. Of course, the shotgun's weakness is the range. Its paltry 6 world unit range makes it a very niche weapon. Granted, that niche is pretty strong, but it's not that flexible, and it will struggle with enemies further away than 6 world units. The sword and hammer are also just better CQB options. The shotgun is B tier. Up close, it's really good, and Halo 3's environment favors it better than Halo 2's shotgun, but it's stuck in a 6 world unit box, and that holds it back considerably. The fuel rod cannon is next. It's not too different from Halo 2, with one big exception. Explosion Largwa is no more. The fuel rod no longer uses an impact damage effect, with all its 160 points of explosion damage going to its AoE. This is actually a pretty big buff, as the explosions deal more damage to more targets caught in the blast. In terms of shooting, the fuel rod is a souped up brute shot. It's a fast firing explosive weapon that decimates all infantry units, especially brutes. What I think holds it back is its slow projectiles. It's best used up close, which can be a dangerous gambit depending on how close you are to its explosions. Its projectiles are just too slow at times, especially in the hands of friendly AI. Your allies are given a tracking ability for the fuel rod, but it doesn't matter since they miss a lot. The fuel rod can be a rare sight at times, but on Salvo Highway and the Ark, it appears frequently. Not much else to say here, the fuel rod is A tier. Our third support weapon is the missile pod. It's a target tracking missile launcher that locks onto vehicles, dealing 255 points of explosive damage. While integrated, it has an infinite amount of missiles to fire, and is an okay option to knock out the Scarab's legs. Torn off, you only get 8 missiles to work with, so make your shots count. Its projectile velocity starts at 15 world units per second, and then drops to 10 after 10 world units. The missile pod is extremely niche. Its main purpose is to be a vehicle destroyer, and it only appears on the Storm. The first time you find one, it's detached, so you have to choose what you want to destroy. I usually go for the regular Wraith and some ghosts, while killing the anti-air Wraith by hijacking. At the next lake bed, you can use the infinite missile pods to destroy some vehicles and the Scarab's legs, but the Scarab likes to be a bit too far away. You can bring one of the missile pods to the hunter encounter if you really want to, and 2-shot each of them, but the rocket launcher is generally preferred, which I'll get to soon. The missile pod can't track infantry, so trying to use it on them is a crapshoot that just isn't worth it, unless it's a big target like the hunter. Even on the turret base, trying to hit vehicles can be tricky, especially when they get too close. The missile pod is bottom of C. It's only on the Storm. It's helpful versus that first Wraith, and it can knock out a lot of vehicles in the second lake bed while on the turret base. Outside of that, it doesn't excel at anything else. Continuing the explosive weapon showcase, we have the rocket launcher. It's no longer tracking vehicles like in Halo 2, mostly relegating it to anti-infantry. It deals slightly more damage now to compensate, and with brutes being less tanky than elites, it's devastating versus them. Rockets travel slightly slower now, starting at 16 world units per second, then going to 8 after 20 world units. Of course, the rocket launcher is great. It slaughters everything in its path. Like the missile pod, it 2-shots hunters while keeping you mobile, unlike the support weapons. It's especially great in the hands of friendly NPCs. They get infinite rockets and are great shots with it. You could even give one to the Arbiter. Kill him, place a rocket by his body, and he'll get back up holding the rocket launcher. Watch as he plays the game for you. Of course, the big downside to the rocket is its sparse ammo capacity, but that's mitigated by giving a low ammo launcher to an ally, whose body is a machine that turns food into infinite rockets. Easy A tier. The rocket launcher annihilates all in its path, and its low ammo availability is negated by friendly NPCs, but you do rely on them staying alive, unless it's the Arbiter. Next up is the Flamethrower. It's our last support weapon, and is unique in being a CQB rendition. It spits super hot fire at 15 embers per second. The flames deal 7 points of burning and anti-flood damage, meaning it's 4 times effective versus the flood. Its max range is 4.5 world units, and its projectile velocity starts at 12 units per second, then quickly drops to 2 world units per second.
That is one big pile of shit.
It's so bad. I don't know what Bungie was thinking with this. They made a close quarters weapon a support type, which makes you move slower, and only puts it in levels that have flood, when the energy sword, gravity hammer, shotgun, and even the plasma rifle exists. It offers nothing of value. Insta-kills pure forms? Okay, so does the sword, and the brute shot melee if you hit their mouths, both of which allow you to move at normal speed and use grenades. This is our Y tier weapon. I have nothing else to say. Trash. The Sentinel Beam is up next, and it's everything the Flamethrower wishes it was. It got a massive glow up from its Halo 2 incarnation. It deals one more point of damage than the Gold Eliminator Beam, making this version extremely strong. Its range is quadruple that of Halo 2's, reaching 120 world units maximum. Its melee attack was slightly nerfed, dealing 30 points less damage, but since it uses slice melee now, it's on par with the Brute Shot's melee attack, and I've already gushed about that enough. This thing is cracked. It melts nearly everything it touches with precision. Its biggest drawback, however, is it burns through its battery extremely fast, and there's not that many Sentinel Beams readily available unless you wait for your Sentinel allies to die, or you're in the last part of the game. This is a B tier. It would go to A if it was more prevalent in the campaign, but sadly it's not. Our penultimate weapon is the Brute Mauler. It's a dual-wieldable shotgun type weapon. It holds 5 shots per cylinder with 20 spare, and has a fire recovery time of 0.75 seconds. When dual-wielding 2 of them, damage is 30% lower. It shoots 15 shards with a spread of 7.5 degrees, has a max range of 8 world units, and each shard deals 1.5 to 7 points of damage depending on how far away the target is. Its melee attack uses cut melee, the same as the Spikers, dealing 2 extra points of melee damage. I don't have much to say about the Mauler, unfortunately. It's just kind of there. It doesn't stand out in any meaningful way, nor does it synergize well with the other dual-wield weapons. Using 2 at once can be strong, but the slower reload speed can bite you at times. It's competent versus brutes and the lesser enemies, but so many weapons already are, while offering good traits in other areas that the Mauler doesn't. It does have a slight advantage over the shotgun at its slightly longer range, but it hardly makes a difference. It's also rare. Not great. D tier. It's just so unremarkable and only appears a handful of times. Our final weapon is the Spartan laser. It's a charge-up weapon that's designed to destroy heavy units. It takes 2.5 seconds for it to charge, then it shoots 5 lasers at once, each dealing 114 damage. The Spartan laser is the ultimate vehicle-killing machine, but you only get one on the Covenant, the one you spawn with. You have to choose what you want to destroy, because you only have 5 shots to work with. You could shoot it 4 times and give it to an ally, but they're not great with it, often dying before they get a shot off. On Halo, however, you can get a laser with infinite battery by killing Johnson twice, making this section of the game trivial. Because you get an infinite laser at a hard part of the game, this weapon cannot be below B tier. It's also handy for the few times you use it on the Covenant, but its very limited usage drags its rank down. And that's going to be it for this tier list. The next chapter will be on Halo 3's multiplayer weapons. I'm still deciding on how I want to go about that one, whether I go with the MCC or 360 versions. If, and only if, you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, leave a comment on your own opinions of the rankings and maybe provide some of your own. Subscribe for more Halo content from this channel, and ring the bell to never miss an upload. I'd like to thank my Sangheili Zealots, my counselors, and my Needler Gang YouTube members for further supporting the channel. I love each and every one of you. This is the Ventral Vatum. Always remember that you matter more than you think you do, and I'll see you on the great journey.